Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. At this point, I hope you have a copy of my drum method book, A Guide to Rhythmic Freedom. This is going to be a very concise overview of the sequencing of the book and how I think teachers and students can dive right in and use it most effectively. So to avoid any redundancy, I'm not going to go into any detail on the content of the book. That can be found in the book and in my in-depth overview, which is linked at the end of this video. So the first section of the book, vocabulary, is broken up into 4 subsections: duple meter, triple meter, 5s and 7s, and specializations for bass drum. The duple and triple meter sections all contain the core vocabulary, the associated stickings and accents, combination exercises, and a Hall of Fame, which contains the most frequently and commonly used important rhythms, stickings, and accents in each subdivision or time signature. The 5s and 7s section begins to omit the stickings and accent sections, knowing that now you know how to implement those variations by just using the core vocabulary. There are a few combination exercises, and the Hall of Fame is now replaced by asterisks on the rhythmic variations that are most commonly and frequently used. The stylistic application patterns for bass drum, or for feet, is written with 8th note, 16th note, and triplet vocabulary in the bass drum space at the bottom of the staff with a snare drum backbeat, and I omit all the bass drum and snare drum unison. So it's much more realistic to use the specializations for bass drum vocabulary section. The stylistic application section of the book also contains duple meter, triple meter, and 5 and 7 sections. But here you'll find foot patterns, hand patterns, and 3-limb ostinatos to work on right hand independence or left hand independence. The third section of the book, stickings, can be integrated at the discretion of the teacher, or you can do it from beginning to end as a separate study. So now, let me explain how I find the book most useful in my lessons and how my students have gotten the most out of it. I like to have a 4-point lesson plan: hands, rock, pop, funk feels, Latin feels, and jazz, triplet, swung, 8th, blues feels. Let me just say that there are 2 approaches to all of these. There's what I call the horizontal approach, which is necessary for beginners and most intermediate players, where you're going to study all of the vocabulary from beginning to end with just the most basic foot patterns underneath it or hand patterns on top. If it's duple meter, you're talking about 8th note rock beat, quarter note rock beat, maybe one-handed or two-handed 16th notes at the most. If you're doing triplet meter, you might do triplet right hand with a backbeat, maybe a shuffle. Now, for advanced students or players with a lot of experience, you might want to try the vertical method, which is to take the section of vocabulary that you need to work on the most, play it with your hands on top of all of the foot patterns, or grab the vocabulary section for bass drum that you need to work on the most and try it going down through all of the hand patterns. So that would be the vertical method. So, hands. All the vocabulary, starting with alternating strokes, then moving on to right hand lead over the first few foot patterns found in section 2. For my rock or funk or pop, duple meter drum set groove playing, I use the vocabulary specializations for bass drum section, and I work on it sequentially through the hand patterns. So you move through the vocabulary with the feet with the first couple of hand patterns, then we come back. Now they know the vocabulary for feet very well, and you can increase the difficulty of the hand patterns to include 16th notes, ghost notes, paradiddles, open hi-hats, etc. For the Latin section of my studies, I would suggest starting on page 118, where you'll find the basic bossa nova foot pattern and left hand easy conga pattern to start working on independent with the right hand using quarter note, 8th note, 16th note vocabulary. Again, these are the hand and foot patterns. So there's a 3-note ostinato going on. You work on the right hand independence. Then on page 120, it switches to right hand ostinatos, and you can start working on the left hand independence, either on cross stick or around toms. For the jazz section of my teaching, the basic jazz regimen, which is on page 124, is absolutely the most useful. That's basic ride pattern with the right hand, 2 and 4 on the hi-hat if you're in 4/4 time. I also include variations in 3/4 for the jazz waltz and in 5/4. And here you're going to play the vocabulary, usually quarter notes, 8th notes, and then triplet vocabulary with the left hand against it, and then with the bass drum against it, and then decrease the frequency of switching between them. So after the snare drum vocabulary and the bass drum is comfortable under the ride pattern, then we combine them 1 bar at a time. half a bar at a time, one beat at a time, eventually one note, alternating between the limbs, and short long, which is when you're playing combination exercises, you play the longer of the subdivisions with your bass drum and the shorter with the snare drum, which is fairly common. So that takes care of that entire methodology, and I think that you'll find those approaches to your studies and your teaching the most helpful. This brings us to what this book is not. This book is not a rudiment book. There are no flams, drags, roughs, or rolls in it. That would have been a different book, twice as thick at least. So what I recommend is using A Guide to Rhythmic Freedom for all your vocabulary and drum set applications in any style, and pair that with your favorite rudiment book, whatever it may be. That is a complete curriculum right there. So I hope you'll find that useful. I hope you'll implement it, whether you're a teacher or self-studying drummer. If you'd like more detail about the sections of the book, please check out my longer video, an in-depth overview, which is linked at the end of this video. Happy drumming, and thanks for watching.